what's on your mind.
Hey there, this is Kemo and Cooper. All right, and we're hanging out today this afternoon. We got a hella good topic for the day. Pulp versus noir. Okay, these things get conflated all the time. They get kind of put into the same category, basically because they roughly came out of some of the same movements of thoughts early in the 19th century and the 20th century. I think a late 19th century,
late 19th, early 20th, I'd say, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And they both got that French influence, you know, as well, from the late 19th century through to early 20th. So there's a whole bunch of reasons people do conflate the two, but I posit that they're clearly two separate things with overlap.
Right. I think it might have come out a little bit out of secular humanism, the rise of secular humanism, and the idea of the Superman. Maybe a little John Paul Sartre in there, maybe just a little bit. Anyway, if you want to go really far back, anyway. But there's been elements of pulp. Essentially, the name pulp comes from the type of material that was used to print this stuff, and it was basically not necessarily paper, but a paper composite. The first things were printed. Especially, I think there was like paper shortages or something along those lines. Wait, got our first comment. Hey, Aaron Jordans. Hey, man. Wonder how dark the video is going to get. Well, maybe it might be. Maybe it won't. We'll see. When we slide into noir, things might get a little bit dark. But because what does noir mean, everybody?
Yeah, absolutely. French for black, like French for dark.
French for black.
Yeah,
right.
which leads to one of the first points of contention. I think a lot of people, when they say noir, they think it tends to, and it does to a point, refer to an aesthetic, that high contrast, not necessarily black and white, but high contrast, lots of shadows, you know, really heavy-handed visual aesthetic that you see on film, and it can be translated really well into comic books. However, the original, and you know, I'm going to speak in absolute terms here, but there is very little absolute here. There's always going to be shades of gray around the corner. There's always going to be levels of flexibility, and you know, how I see it might not be how other people see it. So don't be jumping down my throat going, "That's not exactly the year. That's not exact." I'm speaking in absolutes, but it's a verbal shorthand, so we can all get along with the topic. Originally, it's the dark motivations of the characters, the dark characters themselves, and the bleak dark world and the bleak dark outcomes of their actions. Now, the contrast to that is in pulps. A lot of the time in pulps, the characters are heroic, even though they're in the face of dark circumstances, of overwhelming odds. There's heroism in pulps, and I think that's probably, just to not bury the lead, the biggest divergence is noir. You tend to have anti-heroes. You tend to have people with bad motivations, selfish motivations, and very often you have a negative outcome. In the pulps, you tend to, even if you have a negative outcome, the main character has remained heroic. He's stuck to his code of morals, and even though things might go completely, like at the end of, like, I don't know, Death Wish 4 or 5, where everybody's dead except Charles Bronson, he's still stuck to his guns. He still kept his code of honor. I'd say that's probably the biggest differentiation, comes down to the motivations of the characters and the outcome of the narrative. Like, where do they end up at the end of the story? And there's levels and layers, and there's hard-boiled in between those two, is kind of a bridging the gap, hard-boiled detective. And because the detectives are present in the noir and present in the pulp, that bridges the two, but I think that also makes people think they're the same thing. So you got dark detectives that drink a lot, and it's just shadowy, and they're self-abusive, and people die around them. So it must be the same thing. Look at their motivations. What was Bogart's motivation in Maltese Falcon? He stuck to the law. There's this woman that he loved. He had this falcon that was essentially worth untold money. I believe it was a fake in the end, but he could have passed it, you know. But what's he do? Hands her over to the police. He's like, yes, I do love you, but I've got to stick to what's right. You had my best buddy killed. I've got to stand by him, and I've got to see you do time. That's pulp. in a noir framing. It's got a noir aesthetic with pulp elements, and that's I think where the big issue comes from with people conflating the two.
Right. Yeah, and we're gonna definitely get into that. Anyway, Aaron's like darker than black noir. Okay. He said none blacker. Aaron's like darker than me, and Hojo says Wesley Snap's dark, my man. Been reading Mike Hammer. Been seeing things in black and white. Every dame has something to hide. Right. Mike Hammer's definitely noir. Let me read a description I had that I thought was very good. He said, I would define pulp as stories with lurid sensationalism, often with hyper-realistic violence in situations, and more specifically, stories of this style that were cheaply produced from the 20s to the 50s. While noir, it's more of your hard-boiled crime stories, specifically the ones that deal with emotionally dark plots of betrayal and moral ambiguity. And this guy said, I always thought of pulp as more adventure-type stories, whereas noir is hard-boiled crime stories. Noir is always more heroic. Pulp is always more heroic. Noir was always more imperfect. And generally, pulp can have happy endings, whereas noir has an ending, but seldom what you would call happy. So
I think I'm pretty happy to agree with that. That's pretty much spot on. It sums up the difference between the two.
Yeah. Well, also, there's an element of supernatural or superhuman in pulp characters that's not there with noir characters. If you would to put a direct entomology between modern superhero comics, you would find their roots are in pulp.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like a example would be the Shadow pulp character, who in his day was more popular than maybe any other character has been. We probably can't conceive of the kind of popularity that the Shadow had at one point.
No.
Because he was I say he was bigger than Superman is.
And that was without the aid of the internet, without the aid of TV shows and all that sort of stuff. Like, there's a lot of the visual media just wasn't there. We didn't have the technology for him to be as widespread as he was. And yet you look at the numbers that he sold, the number of words that were written for the Shadow, the number of books that were written, and the merchandising. He's this guy that just executes people with a 45. In some incarnations, in the radio version, he hardly killed anybody. I just re-listened to the first 10 radio.
Usually they kill themselves.
They do. They do. Run out into traffic, or they commit suicide, or he sets up some elaborate trap. And the essence is, if you were to walk away right now, you wouldn't die.
Right.
And I'll warn you, don't open that door. The Shadow warns you, don't open that. But they do. They can't help themselves because they're bad guys, and they're motivated by greed. And they open the door and they die. And he's like, bitch, I told you so. So if you just listen to the Shadow, you'll live a lot longer.
Well, so he's like a direct, Batman, the whole entire first run of Batman was basically ripped off of the Shadow magazine. You look at them side by side, and basically Bob Kane took it directly from the magazine and just like drew bad ears on everything. So that first, Batman is directly off of Shadow. I know the other night we concluded Batman at this moment in time is bigger anti-hero than the Shadow, but that's not saying that the Shadow doesn't have more significance historically. You definitely brought that up. But
I'm happy that the Shadow is sort of a little bit more obscure now, because I can't ruin him. Remember, they tried to do there's one that came out a couple of years ago. It was about school shootings, and the Shadow was trying to stop school shootings in high schools. Like, that's Shadow's big picture type stuff. Like, it was tacky because they were just trying to jam their politics into it. And of course, the whole time through, they're berating the Shadow for being an old white man. It's like, what do you even? I'd rather not see new Shadow content than see it corrupted.
Right. And Shadow's more of an idea than he is a specific race. You could very well make Shadow a black man. It would be fine.
I've often said he's like a elemental force of nature. He's like justice incarnate. I mean, because he's a shadow, because he can't die. There's times I say, where is he? I can hear him. He's right in this room. And the shadow's like, I am in this room. I'm standing right next to you, but you'll never see me. Like he was early on, he was just this living voice that would hide in the shadows of the corner of the room. And even in a brightly lit room with no shadows, somehow he could still be invisible because he would cloud men's minds. So he's bigger than race. He's bigger than ideology. His only ideology is justice, and it's his own personal code of justice, which, again, going back to the pulps, is what's so important. Your noir characters don't necessarily have that code of ethics, or if they do, they're not happy to, but they're more willing to betray them for personal gain because they've been seduced by the femme fatale, because they want the money, because they want the power. So, you know,
the femme fatale is definitely a distinguishing character in noir that's not in pulp. Pulp has the girl Friday.
Yes.
So that's definitely a definite difference there. Yeah, let's see. So no one got more tail in my camera, right? Batman was literally letting people fall. Yep, off rooftops. And how dare you be a white man? True. I dare. Yeah, there you go. Anyway,
I dare every day. Every day I wake up, look in the mirror, check my white privilege. Yeah, so you know, more than ever, we need to be grateful for Bill Finger for bringing Batman out of the mire of Bob Kane's. You know, is ripping it off other people's stuff. I mean, there's a great Razor Fist. Rageaholic does a great spiel about pulps and how vibrant they are and how necessary they are.
I watched it.
Okay, cool. So you remember that panel where it's got the picture of Tarzan and the picture of Batman, and it's the same pose. Like Kane's just traced over someone else's art for a Tarzan comic and put cape and ears on it. It's really egregious. So, you know, I'm glad that Bill Finger was able to elevate Kane's plagiarism into what we decided as a panel to be the most significant vigilante in fiction. You know, despite Shadow being important for the origins.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like Doc Savage. Doc Savage is the early proto Superman. And I didn't make that connection until I watched Rageaholic, his run through. But yeah, I mean, because he had a Fortress of Solitude in Antarctic. He had bullets bounce off of him. You know, he's the Man of Bronze. You know, and he's
Man of Steel.
Yep. Right, and he was just there's so much I didn't see the parallels before, but once he pointed them out, I'm like, damn, they just ripped him off.
And while it's important to acknowledge that, I think also we also need to acknowledge that we've moved way past that, and the mythos for each character is so vast now and so complex. You can look back to your fumbling origins. I mean, you can look to a country that made its fortune through conquest and invasion. I mean, am I going to be mad that the Saxons invaded the Angles and created my ancestors? I'm going to be mad the Normans came over and gave them that incredible genetic stock.
Some people are. Some people try to be. Yeah. So
but I can't evade the fact that I've got Anglo-Saxon heritage and there's Norman mixed in there. You know, I can't be angry about that because it led to me being here. So yeah, they stole and ripped it off at the beginning, and it's good to see those parallels. We've moved way past that, and
your ancestors took a boat ride. You know, there you go.
There you go.
Most likely with a criminal record. So it is what it is.
That's true. That's true. Most of us descend from convicts over here, and it's even a point of pride for a lot of Australians. So, you know, oh, my great whatever stole a loaf of bread. It's always stole a loaf of bread. Even my convict ancestors, like, he stole a loaf of bread.
Which is ironic because, you know, your country's dealing with people basically doing whatever the government tells them now. It's like, you do remember your roots, right?
No, they do not. It's only been 200 years. How quickly they forget. I mean, that's also 10 generations, you know. In 10 generations, they've been completely reprogrammed. But, you know, it also shows, I think, the imagination and the sheer vivacity of the creativity that's coming out of the pulp movement. It was just the Wild West. It was just, look, we got all these books to put out there. We need to fill it with content. Just write whatever. Cowboys, spacemen, sheriffs, detectives, pseudo superhero vigilantes. I mean, the sheriff. Look at Zorro. You know, you got the rich bloke with a mask and cape running around fighting the authority. He's mostly fought the authorities because the authorities were corrupt. That's only a short walk to Batman himself. And you know, Mask of Zorro, we all know the connection with Bruce Wayne there. So these these early pulps not only
They
were
tend to be
foundational.
pulp characters tend to be above the law. They tend to they even fought the law if that was necessary. They tend to be like a I guess a authority to themselves as in some
I
way,
would
shape, or
agree
form.
that they definitely stick to their own moral code, and if that supersedes what the law says, because
Right.
something can be legal and wrong, something can be legal and evil, and we've seen that, and we're seeing that. So these guys are like, no, I'm going to do what's right in the face of adversity. It's the original. I mean, it's biblical if you go back far enough, but in terms of the modern entertainment, Captain America's stand like a river of truth and say, no, you move. These guys were doing it, 30, 40, 50 years before that, these guys.
Right.
And you do have those roots in the end of this 19th century with the French Revolution and the French democratic process and their way of thinking, liberty, leads into that idea that there is a right that goes beyond the law. I mean, it certainly would have been against the law for them to storm the castles, pull the monarchs down, and cut their heads off with the guillotine, but they did it anyway. So those characters, you've got
Rise of Self-Determination in the French Revolution.
And so a lot of those characters that come out of the French also have a lot of influence on stuff like the Shadow, and we know that there's characters that directly influence the Shadow, and even the whole anti-hero thing with the mask and everything. You've got Arsène Lupin and those sort of characters, those gentleman thief that would flaunt the law and again stick to their own moral code. And even though some of these characters started out as murderers, over time the characters would change and actually became more heroic. And again, we're fighting these authorities, we're fighting these systems. And sticking to their own moral code. So there's a long lineage. A superhero can go right back. You can go right back to Samson and Moses. But the first modern pit stop, I think, was that post-French Revolution, rise of self-determinism, right through to the pulps and a heavy mix, because American comics are distinctly, the superheroes distinctly an American creation. You got that heavy influence of the Wild West, the time where there was a lawless frontier, and it was a man with a badge, and sometimes he didn't even have a badge.
Which produced Penny Dreadfuls, which were the forerunner of pulp. So there you go.
So it's all interconnected. It's a web.
Like
and
Billy the Kid and people like that were like mythologized. And
that garish sensationalism. People wanted. They wanted sexy. They wanted big. I remember reading a fantastic article about the language, that Deadwood TV show, and there's that F and C sucker this and F and C sucker that, and they said in the day that word wasn't considered a curse word, but they would censor out the word damn or the word hell because that was more offensive to their sensibilities. So you could call someone a COCK sucker to their face, and that wouldn't elicit a negative response because the idea was everybody knew it wasn't true. But if you said damn or hell, that was a big deal for them, and that was censored. So the sensibilities, even back then, they still wanted that garish. They wanted to know that Billy
because
the Kid
that was blasphemy, and blasphemy was
So the idea that Billy the Kid had killed more men than he'd had years in his life was sensationalist.
Oh, yeah.
Even seen the Emilio Estevez version in Young Guns, where he's reading the newspaper accounts of his deeds. He's like, I never did that. I never even been to that town. Like they completely blew it out of proportion. So from there you get your Penny Dreadfuls, and from your Penny Dreadfuls, Spring Hill Jack, those mythical characters in the Victorian England, you go right through to the pulps with a heavy mix of the French in there. It's a very distinct pedigree, and it's stages and it's a spectrum, but it also lets us very clearly demarcate pulp and noir from one another. So to say that they're synonymous, I think is a misstep. And you can definitely transpose elements of one into the other. You can have heroic stuff in noir, but ultimately it has to fail. You can have a femme fatale in pulp, but she's probably going to end up being turned good. Like she's going to get that good DICK and turn good by the end. A bit like Catwoman. She starts off bad, and after a few rounds with Bruce Wayne, she's like, I could just return the jewels. I could just return the diamond. It's fine. I don't need a diamond. I'm fine. I'm good. That's
some good sex right there.
That's the good stuff.
There you go.
Better than diamonds.
Anyway,
not a girl's best friend.
Anyway, anyone upset the European conquering history know nothing about Asian, African, or Mesoamerican history. Civilization wasn't built by nice people. Nope.
That's the truth.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
This time when Saxons
got the Beano over there.
Salt the land so you couldn't grow crops. They'd kill all your women and kids so you couldn't reproduce. You wouldn't have another generation. I mean, and they don't want people to look exactly the same to them. And they'd think, these people are lesser than us. They're weaker than us. They're bad genetic stock. We don't want to be mixed with them. We want to conquer. We want the land. We don't want the people. You know, I can't even conceive of killing somebody that I despise for their political affiliations. And these guys just roll up and say, they're born in a different part of land than us. We're just going to kill them all. None of those people, you know, anybody that's even said is like, oh, he's a good, fair, and just ruler. Yeah, to you, not to the guys in the kingdom over next door. They hated the guy because he wiped them out. You know, there was no good dudes back then. It probably took that post-monarchist mindset to really, you know, manifest the idea of chivalry. You know, you talk about chivalrous knight and how they, you know, milady and all that sort of thing. And they had these rules they had to uphold. And it was about not attacking from behind and giving your opponents quarter and certain amount of manners and the way they behave in public. But we know that wasn't necessarily upheld. We know they're often drunken rapists who just happen to have the title because they were born into it or bought it or whatever. So to really see that chivalry manifest, it took a post-monarchist lawlessness that you get in the Wild West, where these guys, like, I know that, and again, it's got biblical roots. I know that I'm outnumbered 10 to 1. I know that she's just nothing but a no good common street tramp, but I'm going to go into that. I'm going to go into that Mexican town. I'm going to shoot every son of a bitch who gets in my way, and I'm going to rescue her, and I'm going to marry her. I'm going to make a good woman out of her, because that's pulp. Yeah, if it was Noir, she'd betray me and he'd end up dead. You know, or she'd pull a gun on him right at the end. He'd have to, you know, outdraw her and kill her. And he's realized he's killed all these guys, lost all of his friends, killed the woman that he loved, even though he shouldn't. And he's got nothing but an empty gun in his hand. And he's, you know, and if you do it with the right aesthetic, that's Noir. Can it be Noir without that aesthetic? I maintain that it can be.
Well, there is a moral ambiguity, I guess, that is in Noir that's definitely not in pulp. That's definitely a demarcation there. Pulp characters, even if they're dark, even if they have like elements of them that seem like morally, like I guess there's a vagary there that maybe their morals that they have their own moral code, even if it's not like a moral code that like the rest of civilization maintains, but it's their moral code, and they do just have a distinct moral code. Like Solomon Kane is a good example of that. You know, there's times where he would even blaspheme God, you know, and get mad at God, and like
we all get mad at him sometimes. Sometimes you're like, stop giving me your hardest battles.
Yeah, exactly.
Just for today, I've just had enough.
Right. The interesting thing that I think really kind of separates them is that there's a moral certainty to all pulp. If they have a moral certainty to them, then they are definitely pulp. You know, because they have like a moral compass that they follow. Now in Noir, yeah, you can have good guys, you can have good moral guys, but because it's a noir story and because it's that genre, that moral guy is going to like have things he compromises, or he's going to go down streets that he knows he shouldn't go down, but he feels justified by the situation. So there's some situational ethics that might like skew the moral code a little bit. You know, the femme fatales are real good motivators to take them down those alleyways. I think you would say something like a good example would be the Chinatown would be a perfect example of that. Jake Getz, the whole entire way, if you watch that movie, Jake Getz has his foot on the brake the whole entire way, getting drug into everything. And at the end of it, it just sums up noir so perfectly. Yeah.
Even
never mind, Jake. It's Chinatown.
It's Chinatown. You know? In a lot of ways, it lacks what you think of as a traditional pulp aesthetic. It doesn't have that heavy-handed contrast necessarily. It's shot, sorry, not pulp noir. It's shot in a noir style, but it doesn't have that heavy-handed over, you know, that contrast. But the characters and situations themselves are quintessentially noir. It's a fantastic example of I don't even say neo-noir as they like to term it. I was watching, I was over at the in-laws last night, and Big Country with Gregory Peck and Charlton Heston was on the telly. And I think that's a great example of like a pulp style hero, Gregory Peck, in that, because he's got a very strong moral code. He's a very strong idea of what's right and what's wrong. And even when, and this is something a point that you've sort of touched on, I think we can expand, is that even when the things that the pulp heroes choose to do flies in the face of the convention of society. They still stick to it. That's the important thing, you know.
Right.
The noir hero is probably more likely to be hero, MC, OC, whatever, is likely to be pulled into what society wants.
We'll just say protagonist.
Protagonist. They want the greed. They want the girl. They want the power. They want to escape. They want to escape with their lives. They're not willing to sacrifice themselves. Or if they are, they're a chump. They're sacrificing themselves to someone who wouldn't do it back in return. They're dying. As Leon Kennedy in Resident Evil 4 onwards, he'd die for Ada, but she just sees him as a tool to get her job done. Like he's this backflipping super spy, but somehow he always manages to be made a chump by this woman who somehow he fell in love with in one day when he was 21. He was never able to shake her. So Gregory Peck in Big Country, there's a whole bunch of situations where people look down on him and say, oh, I thought he was this big sea captain, admiral, man of adventure. He wouldn't ride the big scary horse. He wouldn't fight Steve Leach. He wouldn't do this. He wouldn't do that. He got lost out on the prairies without help and direction. He's a terrible, weak man. And his own fiance says, maybe we should rethink this marriage. And then she discovers he did tame the old Thunder, the wildest horse they had, but he did it on his own. It took him, you know, something like 45 tries to get back up on that horse, but he did it. He just did it when there's nobody around because he wasn't putting on a show. He didn't want to fight Steve Leach in front of everybody. He turned up the next morning before the crack of dawn and says, I'm leaving in the morning, but I'm going to give you what you wanted, which is a fight. Let's go pick a spot. And he picked a spot right out in the prairie, 10 miles from anyone else, and they fought until the sun come up. And he said, okay, what did we prove? We didn't prove anything, did we? It was just a fight. We're both bloody. We're both hurting, but I wasn't playing your game in front of other people. He didn't get lost out on the prairie. He had a compass. He went exactly where he was, and he came back, but he didn't tell anybody where he was because that was the wedding present for his fiance. He wasn't going to give that secret away. So they said, if you can't tell us where you were, you must have been lost. Therefore, you're a coward and a useless cowboy. And in the face of that, he still didn't say, oh, I was off getting my wife a wedding present. He just took that on the chin. And everybody in the whole movie thought he was a coward and weak and useless. And he didn't change his stance in the face of that. So society doesn't dictate to the pulp hero. The pulp hero flips society, whereas the noir protagonist is at the mercy of society. I think is a great way to phrase the differences between those two. And if you were to put the pulp hero in noir, he would supersede noir, flip, you know, the society. And so there's this book called, it's not called Wrong Earth. It's called Wrong Earth. It's a comic book, and it's about a superhero called Dragonfly Man, and he's like Adam West Batman, you know, chum, you know. And then there's a modern version just called Dragonfly, and he's like a gritty Frank Miller Dark Knight Returns type thing, and they get swapped in their worlds, and the gritty one comes to the Adam West world, and the Adam West one comes to the gritty world. The Adam West one actually starts making the world a better place by being positive, by being upstanding and doing the right thing. People are like, who is this guy? And even some of his own bad guys are like, maybe I need to rethink my life of crime. I mean, you've got guys, you know, with like scalpels sticking out of their skin because they've self-mutilated themselves, and they've got iron masks and fingernails, and they're like, what have I done with my life? Like he was the pulp version, whereas the gritty dark one, he was the noir version. He went back to this world and he got changed by the world. He said, maybe I can be a better man. Maybe I can get over the death of my sidekick and become the hero this world needs me to be. So you can have pulp. This people call it pulpy. It's pulpy. It's pulpish. It's pulp-like. Yeah. Right. Pulp often is referred to as, like you said earlier, rightly so, the form factor of the book, the fact that it was the type of paper it was, but that lurid, garish, over the top, sensationalist, hyper realistic, hyper stylized violence and action and directness, you can put those elements in anything else and it'll be pulpy, it'll be pulp-like. Until you have a hero that subverts societal expectations and sticks to a moral code, I contend that it is not pulp. It is pulp-like. It is pulp-ish. You need that moral compass that you've spoken so well about in this show.
Let's see. Chris Fisk says Rorschach is definitely my favorite morally rigid protagonist. I love his monologues and one-liners.
That's a great example.
That's a great example because he was a pulp character in that noir universe, and in the end he couldn't. He had to die for so what's more blood among the foundations, you know. But he couldn't change to suit that world, so he had to die. And that's a good example of the difference between pulp and noir. Absolutely. Noir character would say, okay, we're trying to save the world here. He like his partner Night Owl did, just by morals to suit, to save the world, quote unquote. Big picture.
Needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, that sort of thing. And you can even see how Rorschach changed over time. When he first started, he didn't kill. And the noir world changed him. It did twist him. It did change him. It did drag him down into the mud. But he always had his head above the water. You know, they never managed to get him all the way down. And that final thing with Ozymandias is, look, you have to be dragged under that black inky water with us, and you'll survive if you do. You'll be alive. You'll be with us. And he says, no, I'm gonna maintain. I'm gonna stay the course, and it cost him his life. And I think that you could. In noir, he'd say, I'm going to do it either for the greater needs of the many, or I'm going to do it just to survive because my life's more important. But to him, nothing, because he lived nothing but his moral for 15 years. He didn't eat, he didn't sleep, he ate cold beans out of a can, he stunk because he wouldn't bathe. He had no relationships, no friends. Daniel was the closest thing he had to a friend. And he's like, I'm not going to turn my back on. He couldn't. He was physically, psychologically incapable of it. He was so rigid in his way of thinking. And it probably shows the dangers of that rigid thinking, but that rigid thinking also built the world. That rigid thinking has biblical roots that led to all of Western civilization. You can't discount it. Rorschach's a fantastic example. What a case study.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. Right. One of the only times I'm not locked in here with you, but you're locked in here with me, light has ever actually worked. Yeah, it worked. It definitely worked. Doc Savage needs some love. The Man of Bronze. Yeah. Yeah,
same thing. I'd be terrified they'd subvert him. That have some plucky black girl turn up and be better than him at everything.
He's not been popular enough for them to like ruin him. It's so far. I mean, some of the comics adaptations been pretty good.
I think his concept's too cerebral for a lot of the lefty lot to really get their head around. The Shadow's a very simple idea. He's the man in the scarf with the laugh, if you want to rhyme it. But Doc Savage is a bit more to it. There's the regimes and the breeding and the food and the type, all that sort of stuff. He's a bit harder for them to get their head around. And Shadow's, like Garth Ennis, when he wrote Shadow, he basically wrote him as Punisher with a red scarf. He's a fantastic read. I think it's 4 issues. It's great, but he must have killed about 300 people in the course of that book. He just shot everybody. And he'd shoot them, and anybody that survived would turn around and shoot back, and he was already behind them shooting them again. Like he just teleported. He was omniscient, omnipresent, unstoppable. So for a lefty person or SJW, an untalented person, the Shadow's probably really easy to write. He laughs and he shoots people who are bad, and then they frame who they want to be bad as bad. Whereas Doc
basically made him noir. He basically made him noir.
They did. They took away any pulp elements in terms of that moral compass, and this is the problem with all this subversion of modern media is they shift the moral compass to be their own moral compass. They can't possibly. I could write someone better than me. Yeah, because I can envision something better than me, someone better than me, someone more upstanding, someone who sticks to their morals more than I do and who doesn't back down in the face of adversity. They can't imagine that, so they can't write it. They couldn't write Doc Savage because he's beyond their zone of proximal development. They can't understand that such a thing exists. They can't imagine it. How could they write it? It's like trying to write a 16th dimensional character, somebody that exists in multiple dimensions that we can't even conceive. It's like the Grant Morrison thing. He says, there's this 12 more letters of the alphabet. Some of them are colors, some of them are sounds. So imagine a color that doesn't already exist. We can't do it. These guys can't imagine Doc Savage. He's beyond what they're capable of.
Well, the Shadow movie was a good. I actually think the movie was good. I mean, there's plenty of people that would disagree with that. But the reason I think it was good is because the Shadow acted like the Shadow. Okay. Like the guy that tried to kill him that was played by Tim Curry. He scared that guy into killing himself, which is a very Shadow thing to do. The exit's here. Find this, run for the exit, and he ran for the exit, and it's out the window. It was a very Shadow thing to do.
They're very manipulative. That top-down approach to crime fighting. They're very like Batman's always there's some guy dealing drugs on the corner. Batman's as likely to jump in and knock the guy out and arrest him as he is to find out who his supplier and work his way up the chain. Shadow comes from the top down.
Yeah. Shadow always goes for the head. Mainly because he's a when he in the end of that movie when he fought Shiwan Khan, all he did was basically he understood that killing Shiwan Khan wasn't the worst thing he could do to Shiwan Khan. Shiwan Khan needed to learn humility. Shiwan Khan needed to, learn what it was like to be unpowered and helpless because he was just this megalomaniac. So what did he do? He took out the part of his brain that made him powerful, and then left him, to like in the care of people that. It's funny because he was like, "I'm showing God," and then the guy beside him was like, "I'm showing God." It's like mental hospital. It's right.
And there's a sense of irony and justice in though. Like you're getting what you deserve. Because how many times have you seen the bad guy get killed and two things happen? You think that wasn't enough. He needed a meat grinder or a wood chipper. And second of all, someone says, "So hero, do you feel better now?" No, it didn't bring them back. They're still dead. Like it's not enough. So some of this pulp stuff, some of this big picture type thinking that we see linked into the superheroes, there is sometimes a punishment that fits the crime. A guy like the Shadow, and again Doc Savage, they'll think of some way to, Doc Savage is the sort of guy I think that if he was to fight a speedster and defeat a speedster, he'd lock the speedster up, make him run on a treadmill and supply power to the east coast of America or something. Like he would find a way to be, he wouldn't kill the guy necessarily, he'd find a way to make the guy useful. And he'd even
you ever see that movie Man of Bronze, Doc Savage Man of Bronze?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, it's worth a watch.
Okay, we'll give it a look.
It was, anyway, I think it might even be free on YouTube. I'm not sure. I didn't look it up today. Anyway, so Hojo says, enjoy the Shadow movie despite what I think about Alec Baldwin's well executed. Yeah, Alec Baldwin's a hell of an actor. I mean, he's a hell of an actor. Hunt for Red October is one of my favorite all-time movies. And he was a awesome Jack Ryan in that. What would you say of the spirit and the question? Okay. So you want me to take it first?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. The spirit, it's actually it was a direct takeoff of a pulp character. And the spirit, he had a moral compass, an unchangeable, unassailable moral compass, living in a city where the cops were just as criminal as the criminals, and i.e. he became the only true cop in his mind. He was the only true force for good in that city, and he's already dead. He's already considered by everybody dead, and so it was basically he fought evil with an abandon, but with a distinct moral compass, and so i.e. he was somebody that could absolutely not be corrupted, because it never would occur to him to be corrupted. And the question is very, very interesting. He's actually pulp, I believe, because the question basically was all about the morality of everything. He questioned everything. He was from a relativist, philosophy. But he didn't believe in an absolute good and absolute bad. He just believed in the situational justice, and that pretty much made him pulp, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. I think these two are probably in a trifecta with Mr. A. One of Steve Ditko's other creations, who is complete black and white. He's the most black and white character. He's an extension of these guys. He's an extension of the Shadow. The Shadow, there's a thematic play there about the idea that as a man who lives in the shadow, there's a stark contrast between good and evil in his mind. He has that demarcation in his head. He lives in the shadows, but he knows exactly where the line is. And if you step over it, look out. So Mr. A, question, and the spirit and the question in particular are probably the pulpiest characters you're going to get within a noir setting. You know, like the setting aesthetically very noir, especially Will Eisner's spirit, all the black and white. Like the man was a master. He was 12 out of 10. I mean, he was a Da Vinci of comics. He was
having characters jump out of panel. That was Will Eisner. That started with Will Eisner.
Yeah.
Before that, they were all in the box, but he was like, I don't want to stay in a box.
No 4 lines can contain Will Eisner. That guy was next level. He really was. He was Kirby before Kirby. You know, there's half a dozen big names that rocked comics. Will Eisner's definitely one of them. So you got this noir city where everyone's bad and everyone's following their own interests and their own trajectory to get from society what they want. Here's society's parameters. If you can get away with it, it's yours. And they live within that. And here's this guy that comes along, like you said, unassailable moral compass, completely pulp, will die to do the right thing, nearly did die doing the right thing, came back and continued to do the right thing with complete abandon. So it's probably, if you know the Spirit, it's probably the best example to quickly sum it up and just say, pulp character in a noir world. That's the best way to describe that. The Question, it's a bit more shades of grey because he didn't have that absolute morality, that absolute black and white. There were shades of grey for him. He did want to question, like you said, it's such a great summation, my friend. Question everything. Even and we should. And this is something that's come up recently in our society. If you can't question it, you know, what do they say? See who you're not allowed to question to work out who your masters are. If you can't question it, like people who don't believe what I believe necessarily about the world, okay, come and question me, and I'll tell you why. If you really want to have that genuine, you can question anything. There's nothing that's unassailable. There's nothing that cannot be approached and say, hey, why? Why is this? You know, and you can say to me, justify this. And there's times that I'm going to say, hey, this is a leap of faith here. This is an act of faith there. But I can have that conversation. If you can't question something, that's a really dangerous place to be. So the question's a completely necessary character in a world like the DC universe, where you've got the Suicide Squad, you've got Task Force X, you've got Checkmate, you've got all these shady government entities, you've got all these guys working behind the scene. I remember when Star Labs was creating synthetic kryptonite. Superman's like, it's like, bro, what's up? Why are you making synthetic kryptonite for? Why are you making the one thing that can kill just me and my cousin and no one else? And they're like, what if a Phantom Zone villain escaped while you're off Earth? That'd be awful. We need that synthetic kryptonite. So you're trying to kill Superman. What are you doing? You know, the question needs to be there to make sure they hold people in check. And the fact that he's a man with no powers, it makes it more pure because he doesn't have an agenda except the agenda of the survival of mankind, of humankind.
The best portrayal of Question in modern is definitely Justice League Unlimited.
And I was going to say that the thing about the Question is he's been portrayed so differently by so many people. Like Denny O'Neill's considered the ultimate quintessential Question originally. A lot of people like the JLU version. You've got Renee Montoya playing the Question. I don't think that lands as well as Vic Sage. It just does. It felt tacked on. I don't have a problem with legacy characters, but that one felt. So we've got Renee. What can we do with her? Well, let's give Vic Sage cancer. No, don't do that. Come on. So the Question's motivations can be a little bit more fluid than someone like the Spirit, who was basically only written by Eisner, or going even further, Mr. A, written and created by Steve Ditko. He's got that black and white card, you know, and there's black and there's white on the card, and that's his calling card, and that's it. And if you're in the black, you're in the black. If you're in the white, you're in the white. And there is no two ways about it. And it's because you chose it, because you always chose it. And it's the idea that even if someone's got a gun to your head and they say, have got a gun to your head, do this awful thing. If you choose to do the awful thing, you still chose it. And you can say, but I had a gun to my head. And it's like, yes, so you had an option. It was shoot or be shot, and you chose to shoot. Therefore, you've taken the life of that person. So there's elements of that human determinism again. Like, how much do you claim responsibility for the actions that you do? I'd be more.
Well, I remember Justice League Unlimited. One of my favorite things was he kept questioning Batman. Batman's motivations, and Batman was not used to that.
A big no-no at the time.
Because everybody else is like, oh, okay, it's Batman. Okay, we'll follow what Batman says, and questions like, why are we following you? What's your authority?
That's right.
Why are we following this guy who nobody knows who he is? You know, and everybody's like, shut up. Just it's Batman. It's Batman. You know, but that's who he was. He's like, question everything. Question everything. You know, even me, question me. You know.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And he's like, if I'm doing something, you know, you call me out. If I'm doing something you don't like, just question everything, you know. And then Rorschach was basically an attempt to have a Ditko style character in you know, because he was trying to like rip off Fawcett Comics characters, which DC had come into DC at that time.
Yes.
So that's what Alan Moore was doing, was he was taking Fawcett characters and doing what he wanted to with them. But he's like, okay, I can't have the Fawcett characters. I'll make my own Fawcett characters. And so that was pretty much where Rorschach and the crew come from.
I love that ostensibly his motivation was to poke Ditko in the eye and say, look how ridiculous your relativist character is. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't fit in the world. And he ended up becoming the most beloved character. His inability to change, his inflexibility, his unwillingness to compromise is something to be looked up to. Yeah,
not even in the face of Armageddon.
No,
Not even in the face of
It doesn't matter
Armageddon.
that he's the son of a hooker. It doesn't matter that he's a short little ranger that stinks and doesn't have, has to wear lifts and everything. He's still a tough little bugger. Like, he's been doing it for 20 years. No one's ever took him down. He does what other people won't do. Could I say for certain that if I saw some of the stuff he saw, that I was able to go to the lengths that he went to ensure it never happened again? You know, like we have a Batman with a no-kill rule and Superman who exists to inspire us to do better. But when you see a bloke that fed a kid to dogs while still alive, that guy needs to be put down. Could I say that I would have the strength to do that? I don't know that I could. I don't know that I'd even feel that it was my job. But Rorschach was willing to take that burden on himself. So there's a lot to look up to in that guy. And the fact that Alan Moore, with his maybe skewed worldview, maybe influenced by his snake god worship that he does and his own personal Bible that he's written, couldn't see that. He couldn't see that he was creating one of the most beloved characters of the 20th century.
Touchstone, pretty much a touchstone. I cried when he died on that show. One of my favorites. That's a question. Yeah. Definitely. I didn't kill anyone. They all had a choice. Jigsaw. What's your superpower? I'm rich. I'm communist. Oh, okay. Well, what's your superpower? Previous, it was, somebody said, what's your superpower? I'm rich. And he's like playing off of that. I'm communist. Yep. Gotcha. Most destructive supervillain power in the world.
Being a communist, no doubt. Biggest body count.
You read radio. He's kind of like a Mr. Question. He's a
smart guy. He's one of those people like this. I can't engage with him too much because I know he's smarter than me.
Yeah,
So I feel like we're on the same level, brother. Like we can jazz all day, but a guy like Raid Radio, he runs rings around me. I'm just have to smile.
Well, I did an interview with him, and most of the time I was going like, okay.
You just tell me. You just tell me.
Go ahead. I like Rorschach, but couldn't get past him having a picture of my parents fighting on his mask.
That's what I mean.
That's called, you need therapy. Get therapy. Speaking of which, he did write a good pulp character, and in a noir world, in his Noirlum, which is called Noirlum, but his main character definitely had a moral compass, an unflappable, unchangeable moral compass, and through his intelligence, it was almost a superpower. He was so smart. So I would say he's a pulp character, but even though it's called Noirlum, but what you look for is that inflexible and intractable moral compass. If you see that, then what you got is pulp. And I think the reason why people conflict the two, noir and pulp, right now is because they've taken pulp characters and forcefully made them noir. And they took away their moral compasses. They took away their certainties. Captain America is suddenly saying, I don't believe in the American dream anymore. And
that's
Hell Hydra,
such a deliberate attempt just to piss us off. There's also I mentioned early on in the video, there's that bridge of hard-boiled genre that bridges the two, and people tend to think of it just as an adjective. Oh, it's hard-boiled. What's that even mean? It's been boiled so much that it's become hard. It's under so much pressure and heat that it's become hard and rigid and inflexible. The hard-boiled detective bridges the gap between noir. He can be the pulp hero in the noir world. He can have noir leanings. He can be self-destructive. He can do drugs. He can drink. He can smoke too much. He can sleep with bad women, bad choice. Women. He gets into fights. He gets beat up all the time. His motivations ultimately he's doing it to get paid. He's doing everything he's doing for his own personal motivations. The way that it changes is right at the end when it really, really matters, when he's got a chance for the big payday and the girl and everything he wants. All he's got to do is turn his back on his friend or lie about something or betray someone or let someone else take the fall. He will not do it. And in that moment, he swings back around to pulp. And that's where the hard-boiled is. It's all the trappings of noir you want, all the awful, lurid, sexy, alluring, but also repulsive elements of noir. Right, 99 of them, but a bitch ain't one. And the last second when it matters, it's like, oh, I can't do this. I've got to stand firm. I've got to do the right thing. I think because so much of that is detective stuff, because PIs, that sort of thing, cops and robbers, even Western elements, people see those things in the hard boiled with that final, because one percentage of pulp outdoes the 99% of noir. That's the point. It's so powerful. It's like that, you know, one drop of black ink in a vat of water is going to permanently alter the color of that water. If you had a vat of ink and you put one drop of water in there, you wouldn't notice the difference. Pulp's different though. If you put that one drop of white pulp goodness into that tank of noir blackness, it can negate the whole thing, because he made that choice and he's willing to. John Proctor, The Crucible, he's willing to die for his name. He's willing to die for what he believed in. And if he didn't, if he'd fought back against that, he would have gone along with the lie, and the world would have continued to be a bad place. And it takes for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. I think you even quoted that the other day. I think I retweeted it on your Twitter timeline. One of the greatest quotes of all time, something to live by. The hard-boiled hero, the pulp hero, it doesn't matter how dirty he gets. It doesn't matter how deep in the gutters Rorschach got, how any of these guys get. They will always do the right thing in the last second, and that's what sets them apart. You want to talk about character arcs. The noir character arc is a negative character arc by necessity. I would maintain that if you have a flat or a positive character arc, it's not really noir. It has a noir aesthetic with a pulp heart. You look at Peter Gunn, flat character arc. That character, 3 seasons, probably 300 episodes. He never changes. He's always in love with Edie, but he never quite marries her. He's happy to slum with bad guys and give them money to get information, but he never shoots a guy in the back. He never starts a fight, but he's always willing to finish it. He lives in a noir world. He's got the suit. He's got the jazz music. Everything's high contrast. It's black and white. The bad guys are as bad as they get. He doesn't change. He's flat. You know, you got someone like Rorschach's a positive character arc. He ends on a high, sticking to his moral high ground. Noir needs that negative character arc where you get down in the dirt and you don't come back out.
Well, an interesting reversal of that that just occurred to me. Tombstone. Okay. Doc Holliday was a noir character, and Wyatt Earp was a pulp character. Okay, and but then Wyatt Earp goes down the noir direction, you know, and starts like going vigilante justice and things like that. But then he comes up against it where Johnny Ringo calls him out. And then you know, Doc Holliday's like, you can't take him, you can't take Johnny Ringo, and so he lies to him, and then he takes his place because he's like, I'm headed for a bad end anyway. You know, I've justifiably, I'm damned. You know, I'm a noir character. You know, I have only negative things heading for me. I've only done negative. I only made bad choices. But you're pure. There's something pure about you that I want to preserve. And so I'm going to take your place and take this risk. And then he basically says, you know, because he asked him why he did it. He says, he's like, you've got friends, I don't. I've only got one. And but that's an example of, you know, the pulp character, the moral compass, the upright standing individual who always you know, has that determination to do the right thing. And then you have this noir character who's always done the wrong thing. It's always
selfish.
Yeah, it's always been selfish. And then he has this one moment where he's like, you know, I'm going to step in for this pulp character. I'm going to be, you know, because my life is not valuable to me as yours is.
No. Yeah, I don't want to live in a world with a fallen Wyatt Earp. I'd rather risk my life and know you were preserved and go to my grave happy knowing that I helped keep you as you were on this pedestal. It's it's probably a great character study to do on Tombstone, the fact that Wyatt Earp's goodness, his pulpy goodness, wouldn't have been enough to defeat Johnny Ringo. Sometimes, and this is the truth of our world, a world that is beset by evil and that it is ruled by evil and the clutches of evil. Sometimes it does take the bad man, you know, what's a violent man with a big stick, you know, violent men willing to do violence, rough men willing to do violence. Sometimes it takes those men to succeed. You know, Wyatt Earp would not have beaten Johnny Ringo. We know that. It took Doc Holliday to do it, but Doc Holliday was inspired by Wyatt's goodness. You know, he said, as he says, Holliday, why are you here? He goes, Wyatt Earp's my friend. He says, I got plenty of friends. And he says, I don't. That was it. That was it. That's all he had. So the example, like there's even earlier on, even he says when they're going to go have a showdown with the Clantons, he says, Doc, you're not mixed up in this. You don't have to get involved with this. And he says, that is a hell of a thing for you to say to me. He said, you're saying, how dare you say I do not have a right to fight alongside my friend, to fight and kill and die alongside my friend, because you're all I have. Kate didn't care about him. He was just a gravy train for Big Nose Kate. Wyatt Earp, he was his brother. That's filial love. He will die for his brother. So he was Wyatt Earp's goodness inspired Doc Holliday to overcome his own noirness, but then Doc was able to tap into his noirness to win the fight. He's like he transitioned. He became better from his association with Wyatt, and then he dipped back into the bad just long enough to do the job that had to be done. Then he come back out positive, because right at the end there, Wyatt Earp's visiting him every day, playing cards, and he says, "Leave me and go live your life." And he became, because Wyatt Earp felt obligated, so he was almost stuck in a noir mindset where he's pulled down into Holliday's mire, and Holliday said, "No, get out of here and go live." So Wyatt Earp's goodness inspired Holliday to save Wyatt. Good, you know, so self-perpetuating. By being this upstanding man, he turned Doc Holliday into the sort of man that could save Wyatt Earp twice, and gave him permission to go live life. I'm glad you brought that up. That is such a paradoxical character study. It's a fantastic movie. I watch it any day of the week.
It definitely shows the two mindsets existing in the same space. Definitely. And you see that some of the best movies usually have that dichotomy, you know. Let's see. Chris Fisk says modern media has been hijacked by Marxists. That hero deconstructionism is what Yuri Brezhnev warned us all about stage 1 demoralization. Yep. If you've never seen those interviews, watch them.
They're uncanny. They're 40 years old, and the dude picked every single thing that's happening.
Every single thing that's happening right now. That guy called it in the mid 80s, right in the middle of Cold War, right at the end of Cold War. You know, total agreement about Moore, Alan Moore. Yep.
Look, I like the guy. I'm glad that he wrote what he wrote. I enjoy reading his stuff. I'll read just about anything he puts out. But like anything, you've got to take what you want from it and leave the rest. You can't take the whole thing on it. It's gonna
spit out the bones. Spit out the bones.
Yes. Good. I like that. I'm gonna use that.
Right. For my money, I'm listening to two of the smartest people on the scene. All right, whatever. Yeah. Anyway. Thanks, brother. Okay, gotcha. I'm too dumb to discern fools from geniuses. I just know what discussions I enjoy listening to. All right, thank you.
That's all that matters, though. If you enjoy it.
Yeah, you said some pretty smart things tonight, so you know I'm gonna call foul on that one. Anyway, to be a pulp hero is someone that you can see yourself in, a character just enough missing to fill your own history and save the day and have hope for tomorrow. Yeah,
I like that. I like there's elements of that, because it is that aspirational, that idea. You see, we see Rorschach be inflexible. We see Wyatt Earp do the right thing. We see Doc Holliday willing to die for his friend, and I'd like to think that, degree by degree, it maybe works on our hearts, and we go, you know, if I was in that situation, maybe I could do the right thing. Maybe if we don't have these examples, again, demoralization, if we don't have these examples, even fictional ones, in Australia, there's no written language for the Indigenous people, so they have a very strong oral tradition, and a lot of their oral tradition is warning stories: stay away from this place, it's dangerous, go to that place for good hunting, that sort of thing. So a lot of their myths and legends are about how to survive in the modern world. That's a very common theme with all fiction. I mean, even Greek tragedies, everything, it tells you something about how to live. It tells you something about the human condition. These stories and characters do the same thing, and they definitely are tearing them down so that we have nothing to hold on to, and we only have the state to adhere to and the state to look up to. But Hojo's right. If we can see these guys as aspirational, we will never lose. We'll never lose that hardcore, that hard-boiled core in the middle of us that they can't touch.
Well, I guess you could say that pulp characters aspire and noir characters conspire.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I came with that one. I was like, ooh, that's a good one. That's a good one.
That's a really good
one. Anyway, I'll be your huckleberry. All right, thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. All right. Hey, good stuff. Welcome in. Good day, good stuff. And we would have kicked JR's ass. WE would have kicked JR's ass.
Why do I put Johnny Ringo's in a punch up?
Oh,
I think so.
Right.
But I think in a straight draw.
No, straight draw. No, Johnny Ringo was serious. He was serious. He was a Shakespeare quoting cowboy, and he was basically the hired gun. And you don't hire a guy if he can't take care of himself. He had killed everybody that he'd been in a fight with, and basically he was the only thing that was keeping him from being one of the bigger names in the West was the fact that he drank too much, and he had a bad temper when he drank, which made him self-destructive. But no, he would not have taken Johnny Ringo.
I always like that that setup where you've got like your soldier type character or your law enforcer versus the special assassin, the ultimate best. You know, in a battlefield situation, the soldier will, could win. He could get the drop on someone because he's got situational, like front on one, man to man, gun to gun, knife, fist, whatever, in a closed room. Yeah, your Batman's going to win. On a battlefield, maybe Captain America could take him. I think of the Sharp series. There's a scene there where there's this bloke who's doing the fencing and he defeats a bunch of people fencing. They say, "Oh, Captain Sharp, Captain Sharp, you're a soldier, you're a veteran, you've fought in 100 wars. Why don't you come and fence this young man?" And he said, "Oh, look, when I draw my sword, I draw it to kill. It's not a show." And they goad him into it. They goad him into it, and he gets defeated because this guy's got the fancy moves. He outfences him. He cuts his arm. He cuts his other arm. He cuts his shirt. And then when it comes time for these two to face off on the battlefield, and it's all in mud, the guy loses his feet because you don't have situational awareness. You're not a soldier. You're not even a fighter. You're a fancy. Anyway, the guy stabs Sharp, runs him right through. Sharp holds the blade with his hand and refuses to let it be pulled free, and just like hacks the guy to death. He's like, "I'm a soldier. I've been hurt before. You think this wound bothers me? I've had 100 like this. I'll have 100 more. Right now, you're powerless. You're slipping in the mud. I've got your weapon. You think you ever beat me? You never beat me." I like that paradigm of the hardened veteran who maybe one-on-one can't win because the other guy's super skilled. He's a prodigy. But when you take away, it's Batman fighting the mutant leader in the mud pit, in Dark Knight Returns. That's I love. You
don't understand. This is not a battlefield. This is an operating table. I'm a surgeon. That's one of the reasons why I know that much about Johnny Ringo is I actually wrote a science fiction story, because Johnny Ringo and Doc Holliday died alone, and in this story, people were pulling dangerous people from the past to be assassins in the future, and they were both pulled out in the same program, and basically they were both ringers basically because somebody did a psychological profile on them and realized they would be unsuitable for the program because they were both like too independent for the program. But I had this great conversation, one of the best pieces of dialogue I ever wrote, and Johnny and them sitting across from each other, and Johnny's like, "One of these days we're going to have to settle this argument," and Doc Holliday kind of says, "As far as I know, Johnny, there's no argument here." We're not arguing, son. It's already settled in my head.
I already know. And there's also something to be said for the idea that Holliday had that insight into Ringo because he himself, like in Val Kilmer's portrayal, he says, why is he? What makes a man like Ringo do what he does? He says he's got that hole in him, and nothing will ever fill it. And he's angry. He's mad. What's he mad about? He's mad about being born. He didn't ask to be born into this world, raw and angry and hateful. And you see on Holliday's face, he knows because he has some element of that himself. The greatest heroes are touched by tragedy and overcome that tragedy. Holliday has the same emptiness. Why Earp's goodness was able to negate that emptiness and elevate him to be a better man. It's an incredible piece of media, that movie. Incredible. So good. So good.
Let's see. Hojo says the stream made my weekend. All right, thank you, man. They say love me some Tombstone. The guy said Gladiator and Tombstone are two movies he'll always stop and watch. I agree with that. Let's see. Yep, glad to hear it. Okay. In Krav Maga, part of learning how to survive a knife fight is acknowledging that your limbs are going to be cut up badly. It's about making sure no vitals are punctured while you target those. That's true. That's true.
Some of the best written fight scenes you see are the ones where the guy knows he's going to take a punch. He goes in there and he goes, I can't stop this. I can't block it. I can't turn away from it. I've got to take this one. What I'm going to do is I'm going to roll with it and come back on the offensive. And for me, those sort of fights ring the most true, having been in very few fights myself, and especially no sort of training. Those ones where the guy acknowledges, look, I'm going to take hits. My own PI in my novel series, he's a real scrapper, real ham and egger. He doesn't have any training. He's just been fighting his whole life, and there's times he says, I'm going to take a few to the ribs right now, I'm going to be pissing blood next week, but but it'll put this guy in a situation where I can choke him out or something, and he's just getting the punches right up into the ribs.
Well, that's the thing I've always liked about Moon Knight. Moon Knight is like, I want you to see me coming. You're going to see me coming, and I'm going to you can hit me. I don't care if you hit me. And I mean, when you got somebody like Taskmaster saying, "I'm not gonna follow your move set because you get hit too much," And Moon Knight's like, "I don't care if you hit me." Think how intimidating that is. You got this big muscular guy anyway, but he's like launching himself off a 2-story building down into a crowd of men, and he's wearing white. He's not hiding in the shadows. I mean, that's the difference between
being hit is you seeing him shrug off the hits is scarier than him not being hit at all. I mean,
because he's insane. He's insane. He doesn't even feel them, But that's a good example of he's definitely. Batman skews more towards noir, but Moon Knight definitely slips more towards pulp because that moral code. He's following a god of vengeance, but he also has it on the supernatural aspect to him. He's that insane,
and there's been a lot of
his insanity is a superpower for him, but
what's your superpower? Insanity.
Insanity. I'm just that crazy. It's like, okay. It's funny thing about it. This is right after Civil War. I have a comic book over there, and it's like everybody was like Captain America was coming to him in the dead of night. Tony Stark was in the middle of the day, and they're both telling him, "Stay on the sidelines on this one. Stay in the sidelines. Or we don't want you involved in this." And it's like nobody wants him involved because he's that crazy. It's like
unpredictable. As much a liability as an asset.
Yeah. And it's funny because Tony Stark's like, how did Captain America look? And he's like walking away from Tony Stark. It's like, what do you think he looked like? He's a freaking hero, and unlike you, he's a freaking hero, But
that Civil War did a lot of damage to
it did a lot of damage. Yeah.
I always liked the idea that Moon Knight wanted to be seen. I thought that was such a great. It's one of those. It's one of those things where you read it and you're like, oh, that's good. I wish I'd done that. I wish I'd come up with that. I wish I'd come up with a hero clad in white. And they say, why do you wear white? He says, because I want you to see me coming. It's like, that's really that you can hang a whole character off that one concept. I could write you a 10-issue maxi series off that one concept. That's
Nutbar's strength is greater than drunk strength.
That's true. It's true.
Unless you're the drunken. Right. I guess we could probably why this is such a good discussion and why this is an important discussion is because what we're seeing now is everything skewing noir. Everything pulp is being twisted to noir, and people can't really put their finger on it. But why this is fundamentally wrong is because pulp and noir have always they've always been parallel before, and you needed pulp and you needed noir for storytelling. Just like in Tombstone, you had the pulp hero and you had the noir hero. But you've always needed those side by side, because if you only have noir characters, then you have an amoral mess, a morass, where nobody's good, nobody's aspirational, nobody has anything that you can look up to. But you also can't have all pulp characters, because that's a boring world, and you got to have that mixture of the people who don't have the moral compass and people that do. And so the people that do have a moral compass can inspire the people that don't. And then the people that don't can turn right around and prop up the people that do, like Doc Holliday did for Wyatt, and tell them, I know what the bad thing is because I am the bad thing. Yeah. You're not this person. You stay in the straight and narrow.
Absolutely.
And you need both for storytelling, and by subverting the pulp characters and pulling them noir, what they're doing is they're making everything gray. And what they gray want. Yeah, and gray is, there's no use for gray in colors. There's really no use for it. And there's no use for that in storytelling either. And that's the reason why comics have dropped off the map, because the world has got shades of gray all in it. That's why we need our fiction to give us color, give us something to look up to, or something to know. I'm not going to be like that guy. We need both of those in our fiction. And by not separating the two, the pulp and the noir, and by trying to mix them into a blender and create the paste, that's what they're doing. They are ruining the ability for people to differentiate light from dark, and from aspirational to, cautionary tale, And
both are so necessary, and it flies in the face of the human condition to have a world of just noir or a world of just pulp. We, like you said, we need both. We acknowledge both. We recognize both. We experience both. We've both had noir days and pulp days. You know, to say there's only pulp, you go, well, come on, it's too shiny and too bright all the time. That can't be. You can't. You know, and for somebody to have that strong moral compass and stand out, they need someone to contrast against. Noir-esque heroes within that world, and there's no joy in the elevation of a pulp hero if they're already pulpy, if they've already got that heart of gold. However, if you can turn a Doc Holliday into a Wyatt Earp, that's, you know, there's a good thing there. There's a good thing there.
Or at least for a moment, at least the moment in time, to find that inspiration within themselves. One thing about
the best one is when they do it just long enough to do the right thing, knowing that there's no real reward, knowing that they're going to switch right back tomorrow, knowing they're probably going to die. They're going to be Wyatt Earp, they're going to be pulp for just that one shot or that one fight, you know, just long enough for the people to get away. And I love it. I love it. That's heroism.
Because once in their life, they realize there's something outside themselves that needs to be preserved.
Yes, brother. That's everything. That's everything.
That's everything. It's everything. Redemption. That's why everybody loves a redemption arc.
Oh yeah.
Is you know, because this person, one of my favorite books is this book called Forever Evil. It's part of the New 52. And it's where all of the good people, or all the heroes of the world, were like sublimated, you know, by this group from another dimension, basically. And all the villains had to rise up and save their world. And what it did, the subtle things it did for them. And there was like this one moment where what is his name? The bald-headed one, the
Lex
Luthor, where Lex Luthor basically had somebody was like expecting him to be the good guy, and then Lex Luthor's like, he's like, I'm doing something good, but I will never be the good guy, and he just murders the shit out of him, you know. You know, and it was just like, and I was cheering for Lex Luthor, you know, at that moment, but
that's good writing. If they can make you cheer for the bad guy. Yeah, they can make you care. They can make you invest. I mean, that's selling books. That's telling a good story.
And there was this like really cool written part in the back of it where all the bad guys were like trying to return back to the bad, and they had tasted the good, being the good guy for once, and they couldn't quite get back to the bad. You know, he does. You know, even Lex Luthor like starts out like murdering somebody, and then at the end of it, he gives his son a scholarship. You know, it's a great book. It's a great book. New 52 did have some gems in it. But anyway, so let me let's see. Okay, yeah, all right, gotcha. Demoralization, introduction, subjective morality. Yep, and white Earp.
It's an Australian cousin. Wyatt Earp.
Gotcha. Anyway, yep, here we go. Yeah, pulp is constantly being described as noir, and I can't stand it. And does he have a slouch hat with the blowfly danglies? Okay.
We all do. He actually issued one at birth. It's a standard issue over here.
Right. Anyway, the reason we wanted to have this conversation is I actually asked other people to kind of weigh in on this, and they actually told me that there's not enough separation to make an interesting conversation. And I was like,
12 minutes later.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, guys, you know, I love your writing, and I really respect you, but you are dead wrong about this. You're dead wrong.
I was really surprised when you told me that people had said they're synonymous.
Yeah.
You know, and I think we've clearly demonstrated there's overlap. Venn diagrams, there's huge overlap, and you can have a 99% pulp world with a 1% pulp heart. So maybe, but to get to this point, we had to define what it is first and foremost. We had to say pulp. We had to say noir is as much an aesthetic as it is that negative character arc, that adherence to society, that chasing what you want as opposed to what's right. And we had to differentiate the two first of all before we could show why they are two separate entities. You can have noirish pulp, you can have pulpy noir, you can have one without the other. You can have them so closely Venn diagrammed that you think you're looking at one circle until you get close enough and you just see that fraction at the edge where right at the last minute he says, no, I'm going to die for this because it's the right thing to do. For once in my damn life, I'm going to do one thing right.
My story basically is a pulp character being shoved into a noir world with the noir characters and trying to save these noir characters, and by doing so, trying to teach them to be, to pull over to pulp for once in their lives, but so these dichotomies are extraordinarily valuable to your fiction. Know the difference between the two, and put it in your toolbox, because it will make your writing so much richer than you will ever believe. So anyway, so I think that's a good place to pause for the day. Thank you to my Aussie friend for getting up early and waking up his wife and kids.
It's pretty cold here. It's so cold here. but it's like 11 degrees, and to an Australian, that's like subarctic. I'm dying. I'm used to 40-degree days.
So yeah, thank you for freezing to take care of part in this anyway. So that's been Kemo and Cooper. This has been Telepathic Bunny Comics, and y'all have a good day.
See you guys.
Tell me what's on your mind.